Welcome to the podcast, Scattered, One Person's Search for the Story Behind Human Remains. My name is Yvonne Chorlin. I'm a physical anthropologist and archaeologist. In other words, I like dead people. In this podcast, I explore topics related to dead people, from searching for human remains in forensic contexts to mortuary practices in modern and archaeological contexts, and everything in between. I offer information, perspectives, and insights directly from the mouths of researchers, as well as experiences of people who work with remains. All of this aims to provide you with information on subjects that aren't really talked about, don't seem to be a priority, or they can be very misunderstood. I hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the year 2024. This is Scattered, episode 25, and thanks to you, this podcast has now been downloaded over 100,000 times. Thanks to you. So thank you very much. Today I bring you an interview with Dr. Sasha Reid, and I want to apologize in advance for notes at the beginning because I was sick over the Christmas holiday. And so I'm really hoping that I can speak clearly and without coughing, and that you can hear this without cringing. So after the interview, Sasha has given me permission to play a clip from the press conference that she did in BC regarding releasing evidence from being destroyed regarding the Robert Pickton case. So we'll do some notes, the interview, and then that press release will be right after the interview. In news, if you have been following the scavenging study, which if you have been listening to this podcast, you should have been hearing about the scavenging study. It's something that I've been doing with Dr. Shari Forbes. And the scavenging study is something that Shari started in Ontario a couple years ago. And it's in an effort to figure out where remains are scattered and how far, so that searchers can have a better idea where to look for the remains and recover them. I will put a link to some information about that in the show notes, and we have published our first paper. It is an original paper in the Journal of Forensic Sciences. It was published in November 2023, and it is entitled The Taphonomic Impact of Scavenger Guilds in Peri-Urban and Rural Regions of Central and Southern Alberta, Part 1, Identification of Forensically Relevant Vertebrate Scavengers. And you heard me say Part 1. It is now up to me to write Part 2. So I will be doing some data crunching and some writing over the coming months. So like I say, this podcast has now been downloaded over 100,000 times, and you are amazing for making that happen. If you find this podcast and information in it useful, because, you're listening to it, and I hope you're finding it useful, please do consider supporting the podcast by donating. You can donate through Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Me a Coffee is a platform through which you can donate the cost of a coffee, $5, $10, however much you'd like to donate, and the money goes directly to me to support my time. And my time on this podcast is significant. It took me over a year to nail Sasha Reid down to get her an interview with her for this podcast. So I've spent a lot of time on this podcast. I also read a lot of journal articles and books, and to stay current in the fields of bioarchaeology, forensic anthropology, and many, many other disciplines. So I also do the post-production of this podcast, including editing of the transcripts. And the transcripts are available at my website, yvonnechorlin.com. So if you enjoy this podcast, please consider buying me a coffee. Link is in the show notes and also through my website, yvonnechorlin.com. If you want to ask me a question, yeah, absolutely. Drop me a line. You can reach me through my website at yvonnechorlin.com or email me at ychorlin@gmail.com or contact me through my Facebook page at Reluctant Archaeologist and through Instagram at Yvonne Chorlin. You can also comment on the podcast through my website and YouTube. Reach out and tell me what you think of the show and what you're learning about dead people. So let's get to the interview before I start coughing.
Hardest question of today. why, because I'm not anything. I am everything. And so I like to introduce myself as, hi, I'm Sasha. I'm a person who does a lot of things. I have a PhD in developmental psychology from the University of Toronto. I studied there, I got my master's degrees there in criminology and applied psych. And then my PhD is in developmental. And then I am a law student right now at the University of Calgary. I'm in my last year. Woohoo. And I am also an adjunct professor at Ontario Tech, which is awesome and new. So yeah,
Wow. And in what faculty are you an adjunct there?
Faculty of Sociology.
Sociology. Okay. Wow. Well, it's cool being an adjunct because then you get to work with and meet all sorts of new people where you may not
Yeah,
have a chance to before. Yeah.
I know that there's some people there who are doing their dissertations on serial homicide. And I know I've been asked to be a committee member. In order to be a committee member, I have to be affiliated with the university in some way. So that
Yeah.
this is the only reason why I'm an adjunct.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, as far as I know, in Canada at least, you don't get paid for being an adjunct. It's kind of just a status thing.
Yes, it is a thankless position.
All right, so let's kind of go into what brought, like, let's delve into your past a little bit and bring us up to date. What attracted you to doing psychology, developmental psych, and serial killers and all that good stuff? And why go to school? Especially because you've probably been doing school for over 10 years now, I would imagine.
Oh, I think we're coming up on 20. So
Whoa.
I'm dying. But so okay, here's the rundown.
All right.
There's never a period in my life where monsters have not been front and center of my daily thoughts. Never. When I was a
Did you
kid,
encounter a monster when you were a kid?
oh no, I didn't. I mean, I tried. I went monster hunting. I went monster hunting with, and I'm not even kidding. My favorite show was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and we lived in the woods. So my lovely next door neighbor and I would go find the best wood, whittle it down into a steak, and then go at night, like hunting vampires in the forest.
Oh, that's awesome.
We were always looking for something scary. And obviously, I didn't find anything. And I grew up a little and I realized, monsters do exist, but they're not like the movies. They're not vampires and werewolves and whatnot. They're people. And that's even scarier in a way. My parents divorced and both of them married some very not so kind people. And that's kind of where my introduction to and I put in quotes like monsters that are humans really began to develop. And it was such an isolating experience as a kid, feeling so uncomfortable at home and so alone. So I spent a lot of time at the library just reading books, of course, about monsters and witchcraft. And you kind of just do like a little circle and you loop around into abnormal psychology, at least in my library. So I started studying all the abnormal psychology books and I started learning about psychopathy. And I thought, oh, that's so interesting. Like that's a type of person. And it explains, at least in the mind of a child, it explains the bad things that happened to me as a kid. And so just knowing that why did this happen, made me feel so much more empowered and safer. And so I wanted to give that to other people too. So then I went into psych.
I love the question why. I love asking it of everything. I want to know the behind, why something works, why it doesn't work. Why did that happen?
Yeah. Well, and
Lovely,
you
lovely
hear it with
question.
like victims' family members. They always want to know why. Like people I think
Yeah.
are just drawn to the why. And sometimes it's the most impossible answer. It's impossible sometimes. And sometimes the why isn't good enough. And when you get to that, oh, it's so traumatizing because it's not good enough.
I imagine for families who have had a member of their family, disappear, have something happen to them that it's been a long time and it's a traumatic experience. And so they probably built it up in their minds. They want something like horrific and monumental to explain all of this that they're going through, and to have that, come across the killer or whoever, the perpetrator, the bad guy, say, "I don't know," or "They were just there."
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not good enough.
No. It's also interesting. I've heard it from many different accounts. Like many different people have said, fortunately in their cases, they were solved and they got to actually go to court and see the person who killed their family member. And so many people say, that's it? Like they're so small, or I had expected something so much different. Like, that's it? Like they
Right.
were expecting actual monsters. It's interesting.
Wow. All right, so let's go through your academic journey to bring you to your PhD. What kind of led in your undergrad to have you go into grad and then to get a PhD? Because that's a big step.
Yes, that's a huge. If you know anything about me, it is I don't think a lot. I do everything with very little thought. If I had put an ounce of thought into this, I don't know if I would have done it, but here I am. So undergrad, I started at Lakehead University, and it was great. It was close to home, but I wanted to join a sorority, and there was no sorority in Thunder Bay. And so, of course, I'm going to apply to the University of Toronto, not because it's the most incredible institution ever, but sorority, of course. So,
Okay.
yeah, there's nothing inspiring there. I start at the University of Toronto, and it's incredible, and I have the greatest mentors. I I'm still so interested in psychopathy, and I get to start taking courses like abnormal psychology and brain and behavior, psychology and the law. And I'm a super curious person, and so I'm always chatting with my professors, just, trying to get their understanding about these things. And I, through that, developed really good mentors. One of them is Dr. David Nussbaum, just the most incredible person ever. Right now, he studies terrorism. He's amazing. But when I was an undergrad, he studied psychopathy, and he really took me under his wing. And I learned like so much from him. And when it came time to graduate, I told him, like, I don't know what I want to do. And I think that's the only failing, I think, for him as a mentor. Um, it was very little guidance in terms of what I could do with a psychology degree and an interest in psychopathy. And so instead of pursuing a graduate degree in psych, I pursued a graduate degree in child development and education. So I'm actually an Ontario certified kindergarten to grade 6 teacher.
I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, me neither. I threw that in too. Like, I'm a person who does a lot of things. So I did my master's degree in applied psychology and human development slash child education, child study and ed. And that was at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. And it's 2 years. And it was interesting because that first year we did just learn a lot about education and I don't know, stuff about teaching. And I was so bored. I went to my supervisor and I told her, this has been wonderful. I'm so grateful that you took me in. It's a very, very prestigious program, but I think I'm going to drop out. And the most incredible thing happened. She said, "Why do you want to drop out?" And I said, "I'm not really interested in being a teacher. I'm so much more interested in deviance." And she looked at me and she leaned across the table and she said, "Sasha, how could you ever hope to understand deviance without first understanding child development?" And I thought, oh my God, you're right. And so I stayed in the program, and actually that day is when I started my serial homicide database. Because
Really?
she said, you need to understand child development to understand deviance. And if you're not happy with just doing this, find something else to do on the side to help you get through. And guess what? That was the serial homicide database.
Huh. It's funny how those like little tiny, they seem tiny, they seem insignificant, but they change the course of our lives.
Just that one sentence is all it took. And it just seemed to make everything make sense. And she's so right. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh my God, if I didn't get my master's degree in this, I would have been at such a disadvantage because I didn't just learn about children. I worked with children for years and I saw them develop and I saw these stages. I saw how they think and engage. Oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't drop out. Yeah.
Wow. Amazing advice. Huh. And then, for your course of action, to develop the serial homicide database on the side.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
That
it
that
was
was a
an
very
absolute
interesting
disaster.
reaction to that sentence.
Yeah. Well, I thought, you're right. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to do what I have to do, which is, going into classes every day and teaching, which I didn't like. But at the end of the day, I'm going to come home to a database, which is interesting and which I know how to develop because I know how children develop. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, as you know, we do want to talk about databases. However, let's finish talking about your academic journey through PhD and where you are now, and then we'll come back to databases. So
Sure.
you went on to do a PhD after that.
No. I
No.
went
Okay.
because I now felt like I was all ready and all good and I understand child development and that's great. But I felt that I had been at a bit of a disadvantage because I hadn't yet understood much about deviance, not in a professional sphere. So I applied to get my master's in criminology and sociolegal studies at the University of Toronto. And I applied and I was rejected. I was rejected. And like, it makes sense. They kind of, and people do this, which is why I think this is why I introduce myself as, hi, I'm Sasha. I'm a person who does a lot of things. They pigeonholed me as a person who studies children. And somebody asked, like, why are you trying to study crime when you study children? And I thought, oh my Lord, stop pigeonholing me. So I wrote them a letter, 3 pages long, explaining why they need to change their decision and admit me. And can you freaking believe it? They did.
Yes.
They changed their minds. And now on their application website, it says you cannot write letters to make us change our mind.
Nice.
So I go and I do a 1-year master's in criminology and I get a better understanding of, the sociology of crime. It wasn't psych based, which kind of, looking back, it wasn't all that necessary, but it's a great program. And then after that, I applied to my PhD and that was my PhD. Yeah.
Wow. Holy smokes. That's quite the journey. And so, okay, let's talk about the database and how that we know how it originated now.
Mhm.
How did it evolve to the point where you could use it as a predictive model for the Bruce McArthur case?
Oh, it's still very much developing. Okay, so I know that people are really interested in databases, and I think it might also just be helpful to start by saying how this began, because right now it looks awesome, and right now it looks like it's so usable, and it did not start that way. And I think that there's a little bit of beauty in showing the horrors of starting a database and the fact that it's okay to fail. I started this database by having these word templates. So people would add a picture and input qualitative and quantitative data about, serial killers. And it was literally just a bunch of word sheets. And maybe they were like 5 to 13 pages long. And they were never actually in an Excel file ever until I got so many of these forms that I was like, well, what am I supposed to do with this all? I've got all this data, but I can't, do any stats with it. That's when we turned it into an Excel file. And then people in databases will think Excel is not a database, and they're completely correct. It's not, but it's a great place to store data. And that kind of just taught me the importance of learning how to break down variables into zeros and ones, make it as easy as possible. Because you're going to eventually have to be able to run analyses with it. So keep it short, keep it simple. If you have a qualitative variable, don't have something that people can write out. Inevitably, people will spell things wrong, they will get things wrong. It will never be uniform. Always have drop-down menus. It just helps to standardize everything. And that was like really our problem with Excel, is because when I'd ask people to write in things like victims' names or the locations of serial killers, so many errors, so many spelling errors, just they're not uniform whatsoever. And so I gravitated over to Airtable, which is an incredible data platform. And right now, that's where the serial homicide database is held. And I've learned so much in putting everything in Excel and failing so hard for so many years. I'm like, I better understand now the importance of having nested data and making sure most things are dropped down. And also always having room at the end for notes. So I have a lot of research assistants who work with me to fill out these databases. And early on, they would email me to say, I wasn't able to do A, B, C, or D. Can you keep that in mind? And I'd get so many emails that I was like, you know what, we'll just create a notes section at the end. So you can just put that into the individual profile. And that's been really helpful. I tangented.
It's all good. So it sounds like, okay, let's go back to your word sheets. So you said that you had different people filling these out. How were you getting your data?
Yeah.
It sounds like it wasn't just from the research literature. It sounds like you were getting personal communications.
We were trying. No, so this is again like the beauty of trying and failing. So I got my research assistants from the University of Toronto. They were all students. I'm a student. We're all just interested in crime, psychopathy, abnormal, whatever. And so we tried to figure out like how can we get the best data possible? Because again, although we're students, we're all still academics and we want good data. Garbage in, garbage out is a real issue. And so we started by looking at books in the libraries. Like, fortunately, University of Toronto has the biggest library ever. And so there's a ton of books on serial killers there. So we would rent those out and go through them week after week, just pour through those books and take data from those books and put it into the Word documents. You may be wondering, like, oh, why wouldn't you just go to Google? Because I'm dumb, I do everything the hard way first. So I'm trying to make sure no one else does that. But eventually we did. We did end up going and looking at journal articles. And there's not a lot, but there is enough case studies, published case studies on serial killers that we could just like pick information and pull it into our Word documents. And then the lower tier data, we tried to tier the data, right? So first you've got these books that have been published and that are housed in the universities. You've got journal articles where people actually worked with serial killers, and we look at those. And then we have not the best data, but at least it's a temporary holdover information on the internet, in a public domain, or even in documentaries. So we would take that data and put it into the database, and we cite everything that we have in there, just to make sure, like, if you're questioning this, here's the source, and
Right.
maybe it's a good source, maybe not, so take it as it is. And then after we all got very comfortable with that, we started reaching out more to psychiatrists or psychologists, law enforcement, detectives, people who'd actually worked with these offenders, and just tried to see if there's anything that they were actually able to share. We tried to get court documents where serial killers actually shared their own statements, or where a childhood evaluation had been done, just because that's the best information you can possibly get. But again, starting out, I did not know that. I didn't. So now I know. And for my PhD, I will say this. I definitely wanted to contact serial killers. I went to Yorkville Mall. There's a store there. It's called Papyrus. They sell cards. And I went there and I bought 100 empty cards, beautiful cards with beautiful colored envelopes to send to serial killers, because I am so dumb. And I kind of put that in my ethics that I was going to be like mailing serial killers and getting in touch with them, and that was not going to fly. So my supervisor and I had a discussion about that, and he's like, "No, you're never going to get ethics," which he's correct. And so I wanted to, but no, I never ended up physically mailing those letters out.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of those. Was it really, really brave or really, really not so smart?
Yeah. That's kind of like the tagline of my life. Brave, but not so smart. Yep.
I did wanna ask you, it's actually really great that we are now chatting instead of a year ago when I first contacted you because of ChatGPT and OpenAI and all these AI, because they're all essentially predictive models built on the databases that, AI, who knows where they're getting their data? They're pillaging the net for, you know, literature, essentially English. Um, but yeah, that's their data set. And they're building these databases and they're using them as predictive models that now look like ChatGPT that in essence mimic the English language.
Mhm.
So I was kind of wondering, if you wanted to just take a minute and postulate, if you could throw your database into an open AI computer and have it run some analyses, would you be open to doing that and seeing what patterns would come out of that?
Without thought, without question, 100%.
Yes, let's do it.
Listen, because there's a lot of reasons for this. One, I am, and I don't know if this is controversial or whatnot, I love ChatGPT. I am an enormous proponent of it. Ethics aside, which you can't actually just put ethics aside, but like for a moment, can we just please? This is revolutionary. It is fascinating and it is beautiful and it has helped my life in ways that I did not even know were possible. And just on a cat side, I will tell you, because I have ChatGPT 4, I freaking love this. I asked it to write a song about a bad cat named Mr. Vinegar, meaning my cat, Theo, and to write the song in the style of Michael Jackson's Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, and then draw a picture. And it gave me the cutest song and picture. I love this. How can you hate this? But like in terms of writing proposals for things like you're an academic, I'm an academic. Proposals are literally just verbatim the same thing over and over. Here's my question. Here's the method. Why do I have to say this 1,000 times over? It will do it for you. Obviously, you check it, you edit it, you make it good, but hours of time saved every day. So I love it. And in the name of giving back to something that gives me so much, I'd be very happy to put my data in there. I took it from the internet too. Like, there's very little in the serial homicide database that's not already in the public domain. Whatever was explicitly told to me to don't share this information. Yeah, I would absolutely take that out. Violations of privacy are a really, really big issue. But everything I took was from the public domain. So I'm happy to throw that back there. I'd love to see what it would show. Yeah.
Right? Because there's only so much as a human. We can analyze it, till we go blind.
Yeah.
But we are human. We are liable to make mistakes. We can only see what we're going to see at the moment. And we have a subjective interpretation of how we live. How we
Yeah.
perceive our reality is based on who we are. So to have a
Mhm.
machine take a whack at it without those biases,
Yeah.
that would be
And it's
cool.
completely in line with the way I do work. So I never do work independently or alone because I think people can get stuck in intellectual silos, and that's never a good thing. So on my team, I've got doctors and lawyers, I've had historians, geographers, people from every single different background so that I can see like where are my blind spots? What are you seeing that I'm not seeing? And just adding ChatGPT to that or predictive AI, they're just another member of the team, in my opinion. So I'm very happy to use it. I haven't yet, and I'm actually surprised because I have that ability. I'm gonna see. I'm gonna do it today. I'm gonna let you know how it goes.
Well, especially with 4, because can't you upload quite a bit more data into
You
4
can
than you
upload
can with
entire
3?
spreadsheets, PDFs,
Ah!
everything. Yeah,
Oh my god.
I
Oh,
know.
yeah? Keep me in the loop. I am
I
so
will.
excited about that.
Me too. Okay, we're so geeky. I love it.
Well, I mean, as soon as I learned what like everybody's calling AI, what it actually is, and what it actually is that it's a predictive model based on data. Like, well, holy crap. Like, how many more instances can you get about that? I mean, we've been doing predictive models for God knows how long. I've been trying to start my own database to develop a predictive model. You've done exactly that. So let's get the machines on board.
Yes, 100%. Now, the issue with that always is it goes back to that very fundamental basic garbage in, garbage out, which is
Yes.
why like working with predictive models, working with AI, you have to remember this is a symbiotic relationship. It will only give you whatever you put into it, right? So if you're giving it garbage, it's going to put out garbage, and you have to be aware of that, and you have to be kind of humble about that, right? I know in academia, for whatever reason, people have the biggest egos. Like, I think it prevents them from recognizing their own fallibility. So, yeah, some data sets are not really good. And sometimes you're going to get garbage. And when you publish that garbage and you put that out there in the world, that's a problem. But we can stop that by just at the outset. If we're going to start a database, keep that, I don't know, make one of those little motivational stickers and put it at your computer, garbage in, garbage out. And just work on that basis and be humble enough to recognize that you have a job to get good data. And then through your symbiotic relationship with AI, see what you can do.
Fabulous advice. I like it. All right. So let's talk about what you're doing now with said database. Because you don't have just this one serial homicide database. You've got another one too.
Yeah. So the other one is called the Missing Murdered Database, or the MMD. And that one I started in my PhD. So during my PhD, I was working on the serial homicide database, but it got very rote. It's the same thing over and over and over. And so I just wanted something that was a little more, I don't know, a little different. I wasn't necessarily looking to create a database, but something happened. One of my friends from my hometown was listed as missing. Like, I was just, looking into cases of, cold cases, and I came across hers, and it said she was missing, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. What? And it was such a moment of holy crap, I know this person. We went to school together. We walked in the halls together. Like, we weren't friends. I think that's going a bit far. We were acquaintances. We had like our own teenage dramas, but we knew each other, and she was missing. And then I looked further and I found out that she had actually been found deceased. And that was such a like, whoa, I've never, like, I've had friends in high school who died from car accidents, but never who went missing and were found deceased. And so I didn't know what to do. I'm very bad with like figuring out what to do with my emotions. Like, as a psychologist, I'm such a quack. Like, but I didn't know what to do. And so I put her name in an Excel file, because yes, I was still on Excel during that time. But I put it in an Excel file, and I just kind of kept it there because that's the best thing I can do. Just put it in the box and figure out what to do. And then I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And I started populating her name the same way I populate the database, like my serial homicide database: name, age, race, when they went missing, where they were found. And I just, for whatever reason, got caught in a loop, and I continued to do it. And I found I had another acquaintance who went missing and was found deceased. That's two. Since that time, I've had many, many more. It's a problem as a person from the north. Like, indigenous communities are very, very much struggling with the issue of missing and murdered people. And so that's my community. And these people are going missing and being found deceased. So I've had a lot of people, a lot of friends of mine in the database, which is super unsettling. But I just continue to add to it because it gave me something to do to hold those emotions for my missing, murdered friends, and also to take my mind away from serial homicide, which it gets overburdening sometimes, like very overwhelming. And so, yeah, I made that database, and now it's become like the nation's largest database on missing, murdered people. This only speaks to my compulsive nature. Like, it should not have become this.
Well, you got to play to your strengths, right?
Yeah.
If you're good at it, use it.
Yeah.
So, you use the homicide, serial homicide database as a predictive model to help catch Bruce McArthur. Have either of these two databases helped in other ways that you can mention?
Yeah. So, okay, first, I did not help with Bruce McArthur. That was a total fluke. I am just this low life grad student sitting at her computer too late at night doing random things, and I found something neat and tried to share it. Like that is, I think, the extent of my involvement. But it was really a cool moment to take that information, put it on a map, and see, oh, like statistically, this is atypical. Zooming in even closer, oh wow, all these victims are very similar. And based on what I know as a serial homicide researcher, like that's red flag right there. So that was a really cool moment, just realizing, oh, there is utility in this database beyond just understanding how people develop, right? That was the primary goal. How do serial killers develop? But because we added that additional information of location and victimology, we were able to find, or like at least build a very tiny model to show, yeah, this is a statistical anomaly and people are going missing. So we do continue to use that. We're trying to make it a lot more technological than it is. Like when I first did that, it was using Google Maps and a calculator. Like it was really easy. But now we've got this incredible colleague at the University of Toronto. I'm going to get it wrong, biostatistician extraordinaire. She studies the movement patterns of sharks, and she's actually working in the database to see if she can build predictive models within the missing murder database to better predict when people are going to go missing, where people are going missing, and whether there may be a serial killer involved. And the reason she's able to identify whether a serial killer is involved is because in the MMD, the missing murder database, we include all solved cases of Canadian serial killers, right? That's your training data.
Right, right, right. Yeah, because you won't know whether or not they're involved if you don't involve them at the beginning. Yeah, you need to know that they are involved. Train the database first. Ah,
Yeah, so we train the MMD
cool.
on all solved Canadian homicides, serial homicides, not just homicides,
Right.
serial homicides. So because serial killers actually have a really unique way of hunting, and hunting's a gross word, but like truly that's what they're doing. And so we can actually track and see those patterns when they start and how they develop. And we can see that in the database. It's super clear. So by being able to train the MMD on the basis of those solved cases, like we've got something that we can use to better predict. It's not always perfect, but it's something.
So I'm just thinking here. So it sounds like you needed to figure out the pattern in order to apply the pattern to see if there was a pattern.
Kind of. Like we didn't
Yeah?
necessarily understand the pattern. We know that serial killers, like just qualitatively, case
Right.
studily, like we know
Yeah.
that serial killers kill in a very specific way, whether that's location, whether that's victim, whether that's weapon. They they're very routine in some ways, not every way, in some way. But if there's routine in some way, then there's some sort of predictive capacity there,
Right.
right? And then when you layer on top of that other unsolved cases where there are victim clusters and you compare that against your training data, you can see, oh, this either is kind of lining up with that or it's just an anomaly. It's
Right.
not perfect, but it is a start.
Right. Right. Cool. Yeah, I'm thinking of what you're saying. And of course, this is what, 10 years after you first started, you know, creating your databases. And I'm looking at the mountain of possible work that I would need to do on my own stuff to get to that point. And I'm like, I just don't know if I'm up for that. But hey, anybody out there who wants to create a dispersed remains database, I am convinced there are patterns. There have already been patterns showing up in the literature, which is why I want to create a database. I have tried to start it, but I'm saying now, if you want to get on that, whoever's listening, yes, do it. Go for it. It needs to be done.
I mean, you'll never be able to do it alone. And I think that creating a database alone is a problem, because think about this: when you're creating databases, you're looking at variables. Even at that point of which variables do I include in my database, that's a really important choice.
Yes.
I was able to create my serial homicide database with a very robust understanding of child development. And like every year, I'm still adding variables. It's like, oh, I didn't think of that. Yeah, which is super annoying, but you need to be able to be open to thinking about what are the right variables. What am I trying to capture with this? Because sometimes you can include, like, over include variables. I know I've over included variables. We've ended up deleting things, but you have to make sure that you're including a lot. And you can't do that on your own. Like, no one person knows so much that they can just create the most flawless, full variabled database. Bring in other people to help.
Oh. Yeah, I just think I'm, after doing this for 20 odd years now, I think I'm screaming into the abyss, and that's part of the reason why I started this podcast, is just to get the knowledge out there and say, you know what, this is important. It needs to be heard, and I'm putting it out there for those who want to hear it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just got to let it go and see where it lands.
That's the best you can do. Like, really. And creating databases too, like, there's no guarantee that it's gonna turn out. There's no guarantee it's ever gonna be able to
Right.
do anything. But I think when the heart is in the right place and you're putting this together because you've seen something and you recognize that there is a possibility, it's worth pursuing, for better or for worse.
For
You'll
better
meet
or for
people,
worse.
right? You're gonna meet people along the way, and it'll just be cool and fun and, like, horrible at the same time, but mostly good.
All right, let's talk about some of okay, you're doing a law degree right now.
Yes.
Sasha, what up?
I wake up every morning and ask myself that same question.
Okay, so
Um,
you finished your PhD, you've got these two databases, you're working with tons of people, and you moved to Calgary to start a law degree.
well, I moved to Calgary and I started teaching. So I moved here, and I started teaching at the University of Calgary. I was teaching in the sociology department, the psych department, and the undergrad department of law. And so I taught for about 2 years. And I was teaching a lot of courses, a lot about wrongful convictions. Like, I was teaching a lot of psych courses too, but the law department kind of gave me a lot of freedom. So I was really interested in wrongful convictions because they're so connected to psychology. So I wanted to teach a course on that. And I taught a course on the West Memphis 3 for about 4 semesters, 2 years in total. Let me just tell you about the West Memphis 3, because you will never come across, with maybe one exception, a crazier case than this. Okay, we are in the 1980s, height of the satanic panic. We are in the Bible Belt, United States, Arkansas, baby. You've got these 3 kids who know each other. 2 are best friends, Jason and Damien, and then you've got Jesse, Miss Kelly. And Damien gets, pointed at by the police because he looks like the type of person who would kill, because he looks like a Satanist. And there's 3 young boys who were murdered in the Robin Hood Hills in that area. And so he was immediately just like pointed out. So it just becomes this entire case of, moral panic and hysteria and groupthink, tunnel vision. It's incredible. It's an incredible case. But I taught that for so many years. And I thought, you know what? I can't teach this anymore. I can't sit here and know that things like this happen. So I'm going to go to law school and I'm going to get people who don't deserve to be in prison out of prison. And I'm going to teach people about psychology so that they're not using these tactics to ruin the lives of innocent people. So now I'm in law school, actually doing this, which is like insane. I'm working on an Innocence Project case right now where basically the same kind of things happened in this person's case. I can't talk too much about it, but I can say it's an innocent person who's been in prison now for 35 years. And this is a Canadian case, so there's some big, big problems. I'm working on that case. And I'm just doing a lot of really interesting investigations where psychology and the law overlap. So I will graduate soon, and I hope to create a law firm. That's the next goal. So we'll see what happens, but I want to create a law firm where we utilize psychological knowledge and the law to help victims of crime and to help advocate for people who feel like they've been exposed to an injustice.
Wow, that's monumental, Sasha. Just saying, you know. But, you know, if
Thank
you
you.
can build 2 databases, yeah, I think you'll have no problem because you've already done 2 monumental things already.
The team and I
The
should
team.
reiterate, I have never done this alone.
Wow. Holy smokes. Well, I hope to touch base with you again in a couple years and see where you are with that. Because yeah, I mean, those instances where there is a wrongdoing and you've got an innocent person in prison, I think that's an indicator that there's somehow something systemic that's
Mhm.
not right.
Yeah, and sometimes it is actual, like, I don't know how to even say this, misconduct where there's actual intent and malice to do this. But a lot of times it just comes down to the fact that humans are fallible, we make
Mhm.
mistakes, we are prone to all of these cognitive biases. And like, that's why I also say, like, always stay humble. You are a fallible person because you are a person. And so just being able to help people recognize that, I think is a really helpful thing in the law. But
Mm,
yeah, we'll see.
right. Right. So who did I talk to? I talked to the Midnight Order, didn't I?
You talked to you talked to the mini midnight order. All right, so let me tell you about my groups because they're like the beating heart and soul of the work that I do. So first we have the midnight order, and there's only so much I can say about that because we do have our documentary TV series coming out sometime in 2024. But this is a group of extraordinary women. They're psychologists, they're doctors, they're soon to be police extraordinaires. Like, everyone, if I don't know what you are, you're a something extraordinaire. So police extraordinaire. um, and they do all of the on the ground work with me. So that's
Okay.
the Midnight Order. And then the other group, the one that you met originally, was called the Mini Midnight Order. And it was Mini Midnight Order because I hadn't actually had time to think of a good name for them yet. But I have since come up with a name.
Okay.
So they are the Society of Umbra Sentia. It means the Society of Shadow Science. Okay, listen, if you are going to be an academic, if you are going to do anything in this world and have a group, you better give it the coolest name ever. Or else, what are you doing in your life?
I'm sensing those sorority days coming back.
Yes. I just think, why wouldn't you name it something cool? Like, I am not going to name this Alpha Duck. I don't know what, I don't know what
Unless
people
there's
name.
some sentimentality with the alpha duck.
Yeah. Just have fun with the names that you make for things. So they're the Society of Umbra Sentia. And this group helps me with the database. They help me specifically with the MMD. And they're extraordinary. They've been helping me with this for over a year. They input information about missing murdered people. We try to have weekly meetings where I'll invite people, yourself included, just to share the cool things that you do. Because one thing that's really important for me, and this comes back to like having been mentored myself, having a mentor is super important. And I recognize that the one flaw with my mentor is that they didn't show me what I could do. And with my team, I try very much to mentor them because, like, I don't have any money to pay anybody anything. I am a student. So, what I try to do is make sure I'm giving them opportunities for them to shine. So, whether that's helping them get reference letters or write proposals or introducing them to people in the field just so they know what's out there, like, that is on me to do, and I'm happy to do that. So I always try to mentor people so that they know, one, they can do it, right? Enough with this imposter syndrome. Like, no, you can do it. Like, I'm done. I'm over that. You can do it. You have the skills. Everyone else who's like on the top two is just flailing and doubting themselves every day as well. Stop it, get over yourself, and go do it. So that's that. I try to get that instilled. And then also just helping them connect with people. Like, here is what is available. And it's been good. Like, we've had people get into medical school, grad school, and I'm just like, they're doing it. They're doing it because they can see it, and it's so beautiful.
Nice. Nice. All right. And the other group that you were talking about, Calvaria?
Calvaria. Oh, yeah. Okay. Calvaria, the Order of Calvaria. It means the Order of Skulls, obviously.
I like it.
Thank you. You would. So this is Sue Brown and myself. Sue Brown is the staff lawyer and director of advocacy for Justice for Girls. She is an incredible superstar. If I met her earlier, she would 100% be on my Midnight Order team. Like, we're kindred spirits. So she's one of the people that I'm working with on all of these cases that are coming out of BC. So right now I'm doing a lot of work on miscarriages of justice, wrongful convictions, homicide cases, cold cases within the province of BC itself. So I work side by side with her. We meet every week and we kind of just have a rundown of the cases that we're working on, trying to get access to information from the RCMP, et cetera, all these different, oh, it's tricky. It's not fun. But it's interesting because, like, slowly every week we chip away at these cold cases, whether that's meeting people, talking with people, getting information from the courts, or actually visiting certain sites, certain locations themselves. So right now, and I think I can mention this because, yeah, this is coming out like in 2 weeks. We have written a coalition letter addressed to the RCMP, the Government of Canada, and the government of British Columbia, where we're basically asking them to put a moratorium on applications to dispose of evidence from the Picton case. There's about 14,000 pieces of evidence right now that they're trying to dispose of. However that looks, whatever that entails, I'm not too sure. We're trying to figure that out. But until there's clarity around that and until the families are notified, we're trying to stop that. So that's like one of the things that we're doing.
Interesting.
It is.
When you put it in that light, I understand that because I just did a podcast episode with Kimberly Moran out of the States talking about the ethics of human remains. And when I came up through undergrad, I mean, yes, I was taught about, the ethics of working with human remains, but it wasn't so much in the limelight about where the collections that we work with in school came from. Because, you could always tell the plastic cast from the real thing. And it was always preferable to work with the real thing because when you get out into the real world, whatever you wanted to do with your life, you were going to be working with the real thing. And the real thing feels much different. And you also are likely to get representation of disease and pathology and what have you on a real collection than you would a plastic cast. But it was never really talked about where those real ones came from. And, fast forward 20 years with the whole social justice thing that we're now involved in, and people don't even want to take pictures of real human remains because they could be done without the knowledge or consent of the individual who had died. Because the individual could have died 100 years ago, and that skeleton could have been in a school collection for 100 years. I mean, who knows? Or without the consent or knowledge of their next of kin. So there's all of this. It's grown into this bigger picture. And so dealing with something like a case like the Picton case, where it was investigated 20 years ago, and they have all this evidence, which could potentially involve remains or the possessions of the deceased, I could see that the family might want those, or at least want to know that those possessions are being disposed of. All right. So you mentioned you want to open your own law firm. Anything else that you want to do the world peace?
Oh, we'll put that on maybe like next year's roster.
Okay.
You know what I would actually like to do? Take a break.
Like an
Right?
actual vacation? What?
Like an actual vacation. I would love
Wow.
to. I think it's so easy to get caught up, especially like I've just noticed working on so many advocacy cases, how easy it is to get very caught up in the emotion of it. It just goes with you everywhere. So taking a break would be really nice. Yeah.
Do you think you could actually take a break like that? Because you mentioned that emotional involvement, can you just stop that?
No. No, because the last time I had a break was COVID, and it was during COVID that I was like, "I'm gonna go to law school." So that was my break. I studied to get into law school. I think it's actually more of a danger for me to take a break than just keep going. I get ideas.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes, yeah, the break does it's a gap that needs to be filled, and it gets filled with other stuff that you could be doing. That
Yes.
sounds like a good idea. Yeah. All right. I think we're gonna finish up there. Thank you very much, Sasha. I look forward to touching base again with you and see where you're going with all of this and what waves you're making in the field of law.
I love how you laughed when you said that.
Well, I mean,
Thank you.
you've made waves already. It's like it's just a matter of time, really.
Yeah, well, I look forward to updating you and also, as usual, relying on your incredible expertise for some of the strange things that I'm doing.
Always, always willing to talk to you about scavengers and scattered remains. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me here. It was a pleasure. My name is Dr. Sasha Reid, and my team and I are dedicated to the study of Canadian cold cases and serial homicide. And in the course of our investigation, we've come across these applications to dispose of evidence. We've been following these applications very closely, and in the process, speaking with family members, speaking with former investigators, speaking with people who lived on the farm, who worked on the farm during the times of the murders and the disappearances. The applications themselves are concerning. They're concerning for several reasons, which include the fact that through our investigations, we have uncovered the fact that this is not a complete case. This is, as far as I'm concerned, an open and ongoing investigation that requires thorough, adequate, and complete investigation. If we fail to stop these applications to dispose of evidence, we essentially vitiate any chance of bringing additional perpetrators to justice. And there are additional perpetrators. This is mentioned by the jury in the initial Picton trial, who asked Justice Williams himself, what do we do if we know that Robert Picton didn't act alone, if there were others involved? It's clear in the evidence, compiled over several years, Robert Picton was not alone in these crimes. Despite what the RCMP may say about this being a complete investigation, it is not. It is of the utmost importance that we preserve this evidence so that we can have what we have always asked for, a complete, thorough, adequate investigation that brings significant answers and complete answers to family members. You may say, we've had a commission of inquiry. We've had a national inquiry. Why is that not good enough? The commission of inquiry
here in BC was flawed from the start, with people dropping out, with the lawyer not able to actively and effectively portray his side of the story, the family side of the stories, and being roadblocked at every step for being able to investigate this case the way it should have been investigated from the start. This is an incomplete investigation. This evidence is necessary until such time as this case is fully and adequately resolved. We are not there yet.
I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode. Please leave a rating or review and share this episode and podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues.